A warm welcome back to GlobeTrotting. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Boeing formally announced the delay of the first delivery of its 777X last month by one additional year to 2026. The delay has many ramifications for the manufacturer, airlines, and the broader perception of the long-haul jet. So why did the major manufacturer decide to delay the widebody, which is expected to help replace aging aircraft and aid business growth? One of the first major reasons was Boeing's inability to resolve strike action for an extended period. That strike action followed the walkout of tens of thousands of employees who were represented by a key union and sought better work conditions. Now, this included pay and many other parts of their day-to-day life. Strike action is not unfamiliar across the industry and has been a hot topic of conversation for the last 18 months. However, the length at which Boeing's strike action has rampaged on has been a hot topic of conversation. This walkout, which at the time of Boeing's announcement had lasted over a month, saw the relationship sour between Boeing and the unions. Furthermore, for all that time that Boeing saw the walkout occur, it had also seen its output drop to even lower rates than what was seemingly thought possible. As a result of this lowered output, along with many employees walking out of the job, Boeing's finances continue to this day to remain of great concern for analysts who are studying the business closely. Moreover, programs such as the popular MAX, the 767 and 777 were all affected, and the plane maker now probably finds itself in a mindset where cash preservation is absolute king, and it's why you have been seeing subsequent stories emerge that Boeing is looking to sell core assets to try and raise funds. It's looking at cash injections and much more. Unfortunately, what this all means is that alongside the further discussed reasons I'll get into, the 2025 first delivery and subsequent certification that is required to fulfill that delivery have become increasingly more likely as the months played on for the 777X. Although some onlookers would argue that this already seemed unattainable prior to the strike action, this was really the nail in the coffin. Another important factor in the 777X's delay was Boeing's confirmation towards the end of August this year that it would put a pause on test flights to certify the long-haul jet under the close watch of the Federal Aviation Administration. This development, initially broken by the reputable trade publication The Air Current and later confirmed by Boeing, came at a worst possible time for the struggling program. While testing had been reportedly progressing at a positive rate, and it really did feel like we were on a true pathway to certification, a structural part mounted to a GEnx engine on the aircraft was said to have failed and therefore deemed not to be in a satisfactorily working order. Therefore, what comes from that? Well, a halt was required to examine the aircraft and the other two test units. But this was worsened when sources familiar with the matter confirmed that the two other active test aircraft were found to have something similar. This development came when the 777X, again I'll reiterate, appeared to be on a smoother pathway towards certification, but that flight suspension has now thrown all of that right out the window. Boeing says it'll learn from this experience and replace the failed component, but the halt has been long enough to throw all timeframes out the window. Airlines, however, would argue that even the 2025 date Boeing had been putting forward for some time was pretty optimistic, with airlines having their doubts over whether this would be met. Unfortunately, though, confirmation of a one-year delay is not the first time that we've seen this take place with the 777X. In fact, it's become an all-too-common theme for this new long-haul jet that so many of us, including myself, are just so excited to see flying with passengers aboard. Boeing initially quite publicly targeted a 2020 first delivery, which, for all intensive purposes, seemed attainable, but it did become apparent that this was going to be unrealistic, as Boeing faced some pretty big difficulties when two MAX aircraft went down, then there were issues with the GE9X, and so much more. Up until 2019, for that matter, Boeing did target a summer 2020 delivery, if I'm being specific, to Lufthansa, and the first body join occurred in February 2019. So they were pretty optimistic that this was all going to take place. The eventual rollout was kept quiet, considering it quite literally occurred just days after a MAX went down with Ethiopian Airlines. But very quickly, it became apparent that the 777X was no longer the primary focus. A first flight began to balloon out, and Boeing just had problems coming left, right, and center. By June 2019, Boeing did come out and say that a first flight would only occur sometime in 2020. And while it did remain optimistic that the first delivery would still occur at the turn of the decade, again, it became more increasingly challenging to achieve this as the weeks would pass. In the latter stages of 2019, it became apparent that Boeing had some pretty major flaws in the way it produced aircraft, the quality of these, and its core safety principles, which led to so much scrutiny on the planes that it was building, and this included the upcoming 777X. Those incidents that took place at the end of the 2010s were absolutely tragic, and the one thing they've really done since then is see certification of aircraft tighten down, which for Boeing has meant that their 777X has been thrown curveball after curveball. And remember, when a door blew off a 777X unit towards the end of 2019 during a static test, well, further delays were to be felt. And this theme has continued all throughout the first half of the 2020s. Most recently, Boeing had been quoted at expecting a 2025 delivery to customers. In fact, I'd probably argue to you that since the turn of the decade, this timeframe is what it's been running by for the longest period, with customers then hoping for a mid-2026 EIS once familiarization would occur. However, the latest delay to 2026 for the first delivery not only adds 12 months to an already inflated date for the aircraft, but it means that customers are now looking at a prospective 2027 EIS after familiarization occurs. And airlines are a big focus of just the overall response to the 777X delay. Frustrations have been coming out thick and fast. Whether you're Lufthansa, Emirates, or even Cathay Pacific, if you're not frustrated, you're disappointed publicly in the plane maker, and these airlines haven't been afraid to express their thoughts on the jet. While Emirates' frustrations may have in the past been leveraged to secure a better deal for additional 777Xs, these thoughts are viewed as more than warranted. These major international airlines expected the aircraft in 2020, and now as 2025 approaches, not only have they got a fresh date, but the plane remains uncertified and looks no closer to being approved. This means that airlines must rejig their operations to cope, with fewer aircraft being made available. In the case of Emirates, we've seen them advance the retrofitting of their current planes as part of a rapid multi-billion-dollar upgrade to cope with the delayed planes. Furthermore, the Dubai-based company is, because of this, retaining planes longer than it would have imagined. At the same time, while it isn't hurt, say, to the point of collapse, it is shifting away from its ideal business model of keeping a youthful fleet because of this. Lufthansa is also being forced to retain older planes for longer. However, the negative ramifications on the German carrier have been much more widely reported. They're saying they're losing hundreds of millions every single month because of this. And yes, I know the 777X is a big focus on this, but it can also extend to Airbus planes and other Boeing aircraft that are all being delivered at a later date than initially expected. So why are Boeing delaying the plane? Well, we've got strike action, flight suspension, and so much more going on, such as increased oversight. It just means moving forward with this program is incredibly challenging. Let me know your thoughts on the program down below in the comments. Do you feel for airlines that are going through this? I'd love to hear your take. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care, be safe, and I'll see you in a couple of days for further industry analysis right back here on GlobeTrotting.
And we'll fly.